This is Kathy Vincent, and I'm Ed Harden, and we both serve families and children at Parkway Baptist Church. We wanted to let you know a little bit about how things are going to unfold now that you've picked up your VBS in a bag. We understand that since we're not able to gather on campus like we traditionally do during the summer months, we wanted to make sure that we resourced families, and that's actually one of the things that Kathy and I love most. We love meeting on campus with children. We love teaching the gospel to children. We love helping people to understand what it means to understand God's grace more clearly. But we absolutely have in our hearts the desire to make sure that parents understand that they're the primary disciplers, and we really desire most to resource families to be able to teach their children. So we join you in that as a local church. And since we're separated at this point from being able to meet physically, we wanted to kind of walk through what this bag might look like. Kathy, one of the things that I think is most interesting as we look at Creation Day on this particular set of resources is that there are some people that would claim that everything that we see, from the mountains to the sky to the streams to the birds to the smallest critters on the ground, that all these things just developed over time, and it might have taken millions and millions and millions of years for it to happen. And that kind of goes against what we see in Genesis, specifically Genesis 1 in the creation story. And so I thought I might share with the folks that are watching just an analogy. And so if you could, would you just help me real quick and just make a paper airplane?
You know what? I happen to have one right here.
Well, look at that.
Here. Look at that.
That's amazing.
I know.
I get that you've got a paper airplane. That's really interesting and all. Can I see it real quick?
Sure.
Now, would you make another paper airplane?
I don't have any more spare paper, Ed.
Well, see, that's the problem. She doesn't have any resources. And even when she made this paper airplane, the problem with that is that she had a resource to start with. There had to be something for her to use to make the paper airplane. Now, we never have looked at an actual airplane and think that perhaps it just spontaneously came into creation. We never look up at the sky, see one flying, and think, wow, I bet that just popped into existence. And so just like that paper airplane had to have a creator, all of what we see, if we don't think that a paper airplane can just form itself, then there's no possible way that we can think that all of creation just spontaneously was created out of nothing. And the Bible refers to that idea of creating things out of nothing. The term is ex nihilo, out of nothing. And so one of the things that we'll talk about out of creation is that idea of all of the things that we see not only were created, but if they were created, Kathy, they had to have a creator.
Absolutely. Did you know that there was a time when there wasn't time? Right? That sounds kind of weird to us, doesn't it? But God, His Son Jesus, and the Holy Spirit were around before time. They exist outside of time. They've been around forever, and they're going to be around forever. But there was a time when nothing else existed. Nothing. Right? The Bible tells it like this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And that's Genesis 1:1.
And so you notice right out of the gates, the very beginning of the Bible, we get to see that God is the one who has created everything. He is the great creator of all things. And he must consider that very important information because it's the very first thing that's noticed, the very first thing that's mentioned, the very first thing that's written in the Bible. And so it's important information because not only is it the first thing that he communicates through his written word to us, but he wants us to recognize that when we look left, look right, look up, look down, that everything that we see has his fingerprint on it because he is the great creator. From a careful study of the dates in the Bible, we know that all of this happened in about 6,000 years. Some people, again, would say millions and millions of years based off of their speculation and their best guesses. And we know that God created all of those things in just 6 days. And there's some debate over this, but a lot of folks recognize that the Bible refers to these creation days as actual 24-hour periods of time. And so we would say that God has created everything that we've seen around us. He did this in a very systematic process, and that happened, of course, in 6 days of creation. Now, we also look at that. We're going to look more about each of those days, about what was created and when it was created. And so Kathy will kind of go through some of these days, day by day. And if you would, Kathy, start us out with what happened on that very first day.
Sure. The Bible tells us that the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. It's important to note that this light wasn't the sun. It's just described as light. And so God called the light day, and he called the darkness night, and there was evening and morning the first day.
I love that Kathy pointed out the fact that we sometimes put our preconceived notions into what that light was. Well, it must have been the sun. We haven't gotten there yet, though. We'll see that later in creation, but I love the fact that Kathy pointed out that light and that darkness that was separated one from the other, it doesn't necessarily say that was sun. What was the light? I don't know. And so what we do know is that he has created things on that very first day, and then he goes into day 2, and it says essentially that God's created the sky in the middle of the waters, and that seems confusing to us. And we could go into some of the theories as to what those waters were, perhaps in the atmosphere and things of that nature. But if you stand up and reach as high as you can into the sky, one of the things I think is really interesting, biblical writers referred to 3 types of heavens. And we think, oh, that's really weird. I thought there was only one heaven. Well, they referred to the air that we breathe around us as perhaps a first heaven. And then the stars in the sky, which hadn't been created yet, we'll get to that, was the next heaven. And then above that, far beyond, is where God was, out there. And that was another heaven. And so I love the fact that we get to see this separation and this idea of on day 2 of creation. So let's look at what it says. We can't reach to the very top heavens, right? We can't even reach to the stars, but we can reach up here into the great expanse that stretches from us way, way up. That air that we breathe, also created by God. And so it sustains us, it keeps us alive. And so we're going to take a great big deep breath of air. And when we exhale, we can even thank God for the things that we can't see that sustain us, that keep us alive. God called the sky heaven, and then the evening and the morning were the second day. And so he's separated the waters above and the waters below, and there was an expanse in between those 2 places. And he called that expanse the heavens. And so that was day 2.
Yes, then for day 3, God said for the waters to gather together in one place and the dry land to appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and he called the waters seas, and he saw that it was good. And then God called for the earth to bring forth the grass and the herbs that yield seeds, and the fruit trees that yield fruit according to their kinds. And so did you hear how God created and made the grass and the plants and the fruit according to their kinds? And that's just a really important phrase that you're going to hear over and over in Genesis 1 or see over and over as you read Genesis 1. And what that just means is that each plant or animal makes more of its kind. It doesn't change to become another kind. So, for instance, dogs have baby dogs. They don't have baby cats. So it's really important for us to see that God created things purposefully according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and morning the 3rd day.
And then God made the 2 great lights. This takes us to day 4. And the greater light he called sun to rule the day, and the lesser light he referred to as the sun to rule the night. He also made the stars in the skies, and the language there implies also the planets. And so as a result, we now start to see the creation order now even addresses in day 4. It mentions the fact that it would help us to be able to have not only night and day, but also the seasons. And so, interestingly enough, all of these celestial bodies, some of them orbiting the sun, some of them other planets, we don't know exactly in regards to, we don't have the term galaxy used there, but this expanse of heavenly bodies as far as stars and planets are now in the sky, and there was evening and there was morning the 4th day.
Yes, then God created the sea creatures and every bird according to its kind, and God saw that it was good. And so he made the first animals, and he designed each kind to do what it does well. So can you imagine, like, these things just happening, just so happening to be perfectly designed for water, or just so happen to be designed perfectly for the air? It's like saying that we would have a mansion and it would just turn out to be built perfectly without a designer. It doesn't make any sense, right? So we know that God is the creator of these things, and there was evening and morning the 5th day.
So you hear that poetic refrain, there was evening, there was morning this particular day. That speaks to some degree, Kathy, in regards to the defense of why we actually think that it's actual 24-hour period days. There was evening and there was morning the first day. The second day there was evening, there was morning. The 3rd day there was evening, there was morning. And it's this constant refrain that's allowing us to see that this passage of time gives us our separation of days. Day 6, we now have God looking at the earth and calling forth cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth, and each according to its kind. I love that Kathy brought up the fact that terminology, each according to their kind, is so significant, because just like you get apples from an apple tree, and never would we ever go to an apple tree expecting to find a peach. Never would we go to a bramble bush hoping to find strawberries, right? Each according to its kind is significant, and we've seen that in the water animals, the birds of the air that you just talked about in day 5. Imagine birds with feathers trying to live underwater, right? Without being able to breathe oxygen. We were created, and each of the animals was created according to their kinds for a specific purpose. So were you. We're going to see here in day 6 that we aren't just a cosmic accident, that God's created each thing according to its kind and for a purpose. But when we get to humans, it speaks very differently as to how he's created us. So he's, on day 6, created all these things, the beasts of the earth, the cattle, the creeping things, and then God makes the land animals. That includes bugs and snakes and slithery things, all very small things, all the way up to dinosaurs, right? And so we get to see that he's created each of these land animals for a specific purpose, and he sees that it's good. We get to see that refrain as well, and it was good, and it was good. On this day, God also made his most important creation, the first people, Adam and Eve. We don't believe that we've evolved from some other animal, and here's why. We were each created according to our kind. So faith and science absolutely can hold hands. You don't have to be a person of faith or a person of science. But what we've recognized is that we've not seen any kind change into another kind. We've never seen any particular canine or dog turn into some type of feline or cat. We have seen types of dogs evolve over time in other canine species, right? We've seen everything. Think about the different kinds of dogs there are: dingoes, chihuahuas, mastiffs, Great Danes, and everything in between. But we've never seen one kind turn into another kind. And so when we see Adam and Eve, we were specifically made according to God's purpose, and we're different from all the other creatures. Listen to this. Then God said, "Let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." That's Genesis 1:26. The word dominion is important because it means we have domain or control or power over, but we're to use that well. We're to resource the things that God has given us and to steward them well, to take good care of them. But we do have control or dominion over them. And so it just means to be in charge of. God is the owner, and he allows us to be what is frequently referred to as under-shepherds. He is the great shepherd, and we're under-shepherds. We take care of this place. And think about what Adam and Eve had in their charge, and they had to take care of the garden. They weren't just created to sit back and relax. They were created for work, for God's good purpose, and for God's good pleasure in the garden. Now, I think it would have been pretty easy to take care of that garden because there wouldn't have been any weeds. Right. There wouldn't have been any mosquitoes, and so there weren't any things that would have been working against them prior to sin, prior to the fall. And so people were supposed to have charge of everything on the earth, including the animals, and it means that we should take good care of those things, but it also means that animals and people were not equal. I need you to hear that. Animals and people aren't equal. We love our pets. We like going to the zoo, but we are not equal. The reason we want to help you understand that is that we are God's most loved and valued creation. He has created us in his image. It doesn't say that he created any of the land mammals or any of the fish of the sea or the birds of the air in his image. Only humans were said to have been created in his image. And that's so significant because we are image bearers of God the Father. So since we're made in his image, we're special and we're set apart. Listen to this out of Genesis 1:31. "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day." And then what happened on the 7th day, Kathy?
So Genesis 2:1-2 tells us that thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day, God finished all his work that he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work that he had done.
So did God get tired? Is that the whole reason he needed to rest, because he had worked so hard he had to sit back and relax?
No, Ed, nothing's difficult for God.
That's right.
It's nothing.
So the beauty of it is he creates 6 days, and then he rests on the 7th, not because he was tired, but because he gave us an idea as to how we should order our lives, that we should work, but there's a time for work and there's a time for rest. And so God gives us that good gift of a seventh day of rest.
Mm-hmm. And so all of this together, Ed, for those kids who have been to our ministry, know that when we talk about the gospel and we share that with each other, and we say, the first thing that we say is that God rules. And so we make our little crown. And this is exactly what we're talking about, that God gets to rule, that he rules because he created everything. He gets to be in charge of it because it's his and he created it. So that is the first step of how we share the gospel if you've been here with us.
One quick thing that I wanted to help you understand, moms and dads, obviously you may have used this teaching session to just allow your children to watch us perhaps walk through it. One thing that makes Kathy and I really excited is you may have watched this on a lunch break or while the kids were down for a nap or sleeping at night or at some other point, so that you might be able to take a few of the things that you heard from us and you just lead this and you kind of go through these 6 days as you go through this bag. I would consider it a personal win if really only adults watch this video.
Absolutely.
And then took that to your own children or your own grandchildren. But we're not opposed to you using it. And kids, if you're watching this, hey, we're glad that you're here. But I love the fact that we're able to resource you so that you're able to do that as well. We wanted to just help you really quickly look at these comparisons. If you would, write down on a piece of paper perhaps 1 and 4, 2 and 5, and 3 and 6. Because day 1 and day 4 go together in one way. What is it that's created on day 1? We've got the earth is it's void and formless. And so he creates light. And remember, Kathy said, we don't know that was the sun. It doesn't say that it was the sun, but there's some type of light. Well, when you go to day 4, now look at what specifically he creates. The greater light, the sun, and the lesser light, the moon. Day 2, if you'll go back to day 2, you see that God created that expanse that separates the waters. And we said that was kind of confusing. And we could perhaps go into that at another time. But this expanse above and this expanse below, and the separation in between was called the sky or the heavens. And so if you'll go to day 4, we're able to, day 5, my apologies. You caught me, there you go. Day 2 and day 5 go together. And so in day 5, you see that God created the sea creatures and every bird according to its kind. So that expanse of sky that separates the waters. And then day 5, we see the animals that fill the air and that fill the water. Then if you go back to day 3, it matches day 6, where we see that God gathers the waters together in day 3 in one place and dry land to appear, brings forth the grasses and those type things on day 3. And then in day 6, he allows life to inhabit that land. And so just the beauty of being able to see that there's order. The thing that I love the most is that we're able to study and look around and see the order of things, and know that there is a creator just based off of that. The example that we sometimes use from a book by Lee Strobel, Case for a Creator. If Kathy and I were to go walking in Bernheim Forest with our families, and we walked for about 3 hours and got onto the hillside, and there were some rocks on the side of the hill that said, "Welcome, Vincent family." And her family said, "Wow, that's really neat. Y'all must have gotten up here so early and put those together just for us. That's really nice." And my wife and kids and I were to say, "We didn't do that." Apparently, they just slid off the hillside and ordered themselves in the English language for such a time as this to say, "Welcome, Vincent family." Well, there's no way that they would believe that. It's too much of a coincidence. The order of those rocks in the English language using their name would be impossible for them to fathom. Yet again, some people believe that the order of this entire universe just happened without a creator, without somebody that did it purposefully and to bring order into the world. So I wanted you to be really clear to be able to see those connections between the days. Kathy, if you would, talk a little bit about those praise ABCs.
Sure. So in your bag that you've picked up, you've got some activities as well as this teaching that we've just gone over. And so the first one of those activities looks like this, and it's your praise ABCs. So now that we've studied all that God's created, we want to challenge you to go through the alphabet and think of something that God has created for every letter of the alphabet. So for example, for S, you might say stars or strawberries. Come up with multiple ones for each letter if you can, and then be sure to praise God and thank Him for creating all these things that He's created.
And we'll also have the Incrediverse Challenge just below there. The first Incrediverse Challenge that we would have is Exodus 20:11. It says, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day." And so I kind of like a challenge. I like a competition. And so we've included a balloon in that bag. And so whether you do this with a sibling or with mom or with dad or with somebody else, perhaps you do it on your own. You blow the balloon up, and the idea is just to, everybody's probably played this game. How many times can you hit it? Can you keep it from hitting the floor? And so instead of just trying to keep the balloon off the ground, as you hit it, say each word. And so to see if you can do that first, perhaps in little chunks. I think memorizing things in chunks is really good. So, for in 6 days the Lord made. For in 6 days the Lord made. For in 6 days the Lord made. And do that until you have it. So, for in 6 days the Lord made. And now we try to add to it. And so you just try to keep the balloon off the ground while you're doing that. And hopefully that's a way to mix movement and memory. And we know that obviously when you mix movement and memory with children, there's a greater likelihood that that'll stick.
Sure, and one of our favorite ways to help us remember things during our traditional VBS would be our craft time, where we get to spend some time being creative and remembering what the story was about. So we have included for you all the parts and pieces to make a wonder wheel, which will turn out like this when you're all finished, except for colored, hopefully. And it says in 6 short days everything was made, and that's what we've just learned. And so as you can spin this backside, you can see the different numbers for the days of creation and what was made that day. So if you've colored that up really nicely, it'll be a great reminder for you of what God has made and on which day he made it.
And obviously we'd love to be able to see some of those completed and send some pictures and tag us on Facebook and other social media platforms. As we close, I want you to understand that some of the research that's coming in suggests that a number of people that were raised in the church really begin to struggle to figure out if this Genesis account is true. And here's the problem. If you start to make alterations to, well, maybe it's just poetic, or maybe it's just a nifty story or an analogy, or maybe it's a metaphor, or maybe it's an allegory that explains it, and you start to allow yourself to give into those kinds of ideas. One, the Bible was preserved for us according to how God wanted to allow us to have it at our disposal. There are allegories in the Bible. There are metaphors in the Bible, but you have to learn to read the Bible the way it's intended to be read. Some are histories. Some are wisdom books. This is, for all accounts, a historical account of how the world was created. Even Jesus refers to it in the New Testament, according to these the creation account, as a historical event. And so what I want you to understand most, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers, I want you to understand that if we begin from page 1 making reading into this what we want it to say, rather than allow it to speak for itself, then all the other pages will make concessions for as well. And so one of the reasons why, especially children that grow up to become students and then young adults that begin scratching their head to wonder whether or not this is true, then begin to question everything else. And we don't want anybody to just believe it blindly. There is a faith aspect to it, but there is a faith and a hope, a confident expectation as to what God would have us do and what God would have us believe. This idea of orthodoxy, this right teaching that preserves what God's Word says, the way that He's written it, the way He's preserved it, and the way He would have us interpret it. He's given it to us. And so I would encourage you to read through Genesis 1:1 through about 2:12 to see that creation story again. We think that we know it. Yeah. In the first day and the second day. But really go back and recognize that there is an absolute beauty to understanding that God has created things in a particular way for a particular purpose, and that we are not cosmic accidents. We didn't evolve over millions of years from one kind into another kind. We are distinctly made apart from the animals. We are not the same as animals. We are made in God's image. And I really appreciate the fact that this Creation Day bag allows us to see that perhaps in a more rich way, more clear way as well. The alphabet, the ABCs of praise, phenomenal. Do that when you're driving along the road. Make it a game. If you're traveling places, some people are on the road a little bit more now on vacations. Everybody alternate. You got A, you got B, you got C, you got D. And we're trying to find things not only that start with that letter, but things that we can be thankful for. We're trying to resource you so that you can actually be able to praise God in your living rooms, on the highways, before you go to bed, as you're sitting at the breakfast table. And we're grateful to be able to do that. Once again, Kathy Vincent, I'm Ed Harden, and we're so grateful that you chose to watch this video. obviously, if you have any other ways that we might be able to minister to you during these times, just give us a shout at the church office. We're so glad that you joined us. Thanks so much.